I pulled up Dane Brugler's mock draft at The Athletic. He's got a 7-round mock draft. Now, I'm not going to sit here and badmouth mock drafts because one time I did that, I got in a lot of trouble, and I'll explain off the air how that happened. But, Ian, I think you remember it all too well. But mock drafts are not the end-all, be-all. But I wanted to do this exercise, and I learned a lot from this exercise where he's got 7 rounds. And I figure no knocking Dane Brugler, who knows these prospects way better than I do. But I think I know the Titans better than he does. So I'm sitting down in his position. I put myself in the Titans' position at each spot on the board. Now, I already knew who he was going to pick because I'd already read the article before. But one thing that when I did the exercise that I wanted to make sure that I didn't do was I wanted to make sure that I didn't look forward to see who would be available with my next pick. And that kind of threw me for a loop. Because if I know there's going to be corners still available with my second pick or my third pick, then it makes it easier for me to narrow down what I want to take with my first pick. So I couldn't do that. I would not let myself do that. I'll be honest, after the exercise, I didn't give myself do-overs either. Like I didn't let myself draft somebody in the third round, then go back and say, well, now I don't need this in the second round. Let me draft this guy instead. Because you don't get that luxury when you're picking on draft day. So without further ado, we'll go over his 7-round mock draft with my picks in it, and we start at number 22 overall in the first round. Dane Brugler picks Christian Barmore, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. Off the board, potential Titans targets, Zaven Collins goes at 15 to New England. Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma State, goes at 20 to Chicago. Can't take him. And Jalen Phillips, the pass rusher from Miami, goes at 21 to Indianapolis. He goes Christian Barmore. I go Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia. He projects as a younger Yannick Ngakoue. And remember, Ngakoue's kind of slowed down in terms of productivity, but when he was with the Jags and he was next to Calais Campbell, Yannick Ngakoue gave the Titans nightmares. Put him next to Jeffrey Simmons. Put him next to Danico Autry. He led the SEC in sacks. He's a perfect 3-4 outside edge rusher. I know they've signed Bud Dupree, but he's coming off of an injury. Harold Landry is a free agent at the end of the year. I just think you can never have enough pass rushers. To me, it's the second most important thing behind quarterback. So even though you can say bigger need here, you could have gone with Greg Newsome with that pick. You could have gone with Elijah Moore with that pick. You could have gone with anybody else. I went with Azeez Ojulari at 22 in Dane Brugler's mock draft.
Yeah, and I think one important thing to point out, too, is Elijah Moore, he picked at 25. Greg Newsome, he picked at 26. Rashad Bateman, he picked at 27. So no matter which direction the Titans choose to go in this draft, there are going to be options.
That takes us to the second round. He goes Joseph Asai, outside linebacker, Texas. Now, Teron Davenport doesn't like Joseph Asai. I don't know enough about him, but gone. Kadarius Toney goes at 51 to Washington, wide receiver. Gregory Rousseau at 42 to the Giants. And Kelvin Joseph, a corner, because corner's important, goes at 49 to Arizona. This is where I went wide receiver. I don't, 22, I have a hard time wide receiver. Even Elijah Moore, I have a hard time. I go Rondale Moore, Purdue, with that pick in the second round. Brugler's got him ranked as the 8th overall wide receiver. He projects purely as a slot. I think that's going to scare some teams away because they're going to say, hey, if I'm going to take a guy this high or I'm going to take a guy in the first round, I need him to be an outside guy. I don't want him to be a slot guy. Also, on his pro day, he ran a 4.31 40 speed. I don't believe that time, but I do believe that he's pretty fast. So that's where I go wide receiver, is I go Rondale Moore, which then throws off the whole board, including the third round, which I want to get to next. The third round was the toughest one for me at 85. Here's where it's tough, and here's where knowing the draft becomes important. The Titans need a tight end. But you're picking at 85, the back end of the third round. Tommy Trimble is gone on Dane Brugler's mock draft, 63 to Carolina. Brevin Jordan out of Miami is gone at 74 to Washington. He goes Tutu Atwell, slot wide receiver out of Louisville. He goes Tutu Atwell in the third round. Well, I don't need Tutu Atwell because I just drafted Rondale Moore. So I go Kendrick Green, a guard/center out of Illinois. Now, There are other names, Wyatt Davis, who's more of a pure guard, who's available out of Ohio State. And then there's Stone Forsythe, who's a tackle out of Florida. And remember, Taylor Lewan, this is the last year that they're really tied to Lewan. But I go with a guard/center, Kendrick Green out of Illinois. He's the 4th-ranked center in this class. He was a 3-year starter at Illinois, and he projects as a starter at all 3 interior line positions. Ben Jones is a free agent after the end of the year. Roger Saffold, I think, is like a $12.5 million cap hit next year. You could cut Roger Saffold. You could move Kendrick Green into that spot. You could keep Saffold at that big salary after the end of this year. Put Kendrick Green in as starter at center in place of Ben Jones, who's not getting any younger, who's not getting any cheaper. I went with Kendrick Green, the guard center out of Illinois in the 3rd round. Maybe the riskiest pick, but if the tight ends are gone, I'm not reaching for one. I got to take a corner, right?
Yeah.
Like at this point, 4th pick, 3rd round, number 100. He goes Robert Rochelle, the corner out of Central Arkansas. I will stay with that pick. Robert Rochelle. I have to go corner. And this is where the needs. I hate picking for need. I hate picking for need. I do. I hate it, Caroline. But I picked for need here because I had to pick a corner.
Picking for need in the 4th round. Don't hate it.
Well, it's the 3rd round.
Late in the 3rd round.
It is late in the 3rd round. I would agree. I would say this, though. After doing the exercise, and again, I hate, saying that I did the exercise, so now I know. I think I would have traded both 3rd-round picks to move up to get a tight end. So if I can take my 2 3rd-round picks and move all the way up to the top of the 3rd round and get the best tight end off the board, I think that's where I would fill that need. Or maybe a corner there or something. But yeah.
I would say there you would need to fill it with a corner or tight end.
You definitely got to go corner at some point, which takes us to the 4th round. Dane Brugler mocks Hunter Long, the tight end out of Boston College. Makes sense to me. He's got Vrabel ties. He was productive. Blocker first. Makes sense. I went with Shakur Brown, the corner out of Michigan State. I like speed guys at corner. And again, I know I need a corner, so I'm taking Robert Rochelle at the end of the 3rd round. I need to take one in the 4th round, too, just to give me better odds of actually hitting on that pick with that corner. So I go Shakur Brown out of Michigan State. DJ Daniel out of Georgia was also a consideration there, which takes us all the way to the 5th round. Let me start by saying when we get to the 5th round, there's no way I know these guys like Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, even TD. The way those guys that do it, the way they know it, there's no way I know about it. But he goes Dan Moore Jr., a tackle out of Texas A&M. I double down on edge rusher. Jonathan Cooper, Ohio State. He was a team captain at Ohio State. He had 6.5 sacks in 2018. We know he fits the scheme. Kerry Coombs, former Titans secondary coach, is the DC at Ohio State. He knows Vrabel, who I believe was part of recruiting him or football camps or something like that. And again, it's the 5th round. So it's not like there's a high, it's not like there's a high bar for him to pass for it to be a decent 5th round pick. Loves ball. We need guys who love ball, loves ball, loves ball, loves ball. Team captain at Ohio State went through all the injuries he went. Ohio State guy, we know Vrabel loves him. I go Jonathan Cooper in the 5th round. Just another pass rusher. So I double down on pass rusher.
And I think since it's such a valuable position and it's a position that the Titans previously haven't really utilized, you need depth at that position. You need just someone that can be there in case there's a Bud Dupree injury, knock on wood, in case something weird happens. You just have to have depth in that position if you want to see this defense improve.
So once I got to the 6th round, I went full on need. Evan McPherson is who Dane Brugler picks, the kicker out of Florida. I don't. I go Nick Neiman, a linebacker out of Iowa. He's the top inside linebacker left on the board. I go with Nick Neiman because I think the Titans have had success in the later rounds drafting inside linebackers who are special teams players who then find their way onto the defense. Jayon Brown did it under John Robinson. David Long Jr. did it under John Robinson and really played a lot last year. Rashawn Evans, they're going to decline the fifth-year option. He'll be a free agent at the end of the year. Jayon Brown is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Those are two inside linebackers you have to replace. I get a tough Big Ten kid, Nick Neiman, the linebacker out of Iowa. Again, Dane Brugler goes with the kicker from Florida. Here's where I disagree with this. Not that the sixth round is a big value pick or anything, but, I mean, every kicker you draft could be awesome. They could stink. Roberto Aguayo made every kick in college at Florida State. The Bucs used a second-round pick on him. He couldn't kick in the NFL. So to me, I just say, hey, I'll maybe draft a guy in the seventh round or something with that pick so that I can get the best free agent that would be out there. But I'm not going to take pass on a guy who could be starting for me next year just so I can take a kicker, because I do need a kicker.
I take your linebacker, and I raise you a corner. So the Titans picked 205 in this round. Dane Brugler has 198, Kerry Vincent Jr. to the Chargers. I would say, let's say he's still there at 205, I think the Titans have to take Kerry Vincent Jr.
Although, for this exercise, he's not available.
He's not available, but
I
saying
can't trade.
If he is available at 205, and if he's available at 198, the odds of him sliding down to 205, I would say, are fairly high, maybe. So I would say that if he is available at 205, you take Kerry Vincent.
So I thought about getting the Jimmy Johnson trade chart out, and I thought about trying to make my own trades, and then I was like, no, that's too much.
It's a lot.
That's too much. But I hear you. That takes us to pick number 215, also in the sixth round. Dane Brugler has Richard LeCount, a player in the secondary out of Georgia, a DB at 215. Jared Stillman goes Patrick Johnson, an edge rusher out of Tulane. He was too good on the board for me to pass up. Patrick Johnson is undersized, and he's not big, he's not fast, he's not all the things that get you drafted high. He's none of those things. 10 sacks last year at Tulane. He's a 3-year starter. As a sophomore, he had 10.5 sacks. He's a 3-time All-AAC performer. I'm in the sixth round, and I can get a guy who had 10 sacks last year in college and had 10.5 sacks in another season. I was stunned he was on the board. I know I've already got 2 edge rushers, but I'm getting a 10-sack guy in the sixth round. I'm making the pick. And then that takes us to our final pick at 232. In the seventh round from the Miami Dolphins, acquired in the Isaiah Wilson trade, he goes Sage Surratt, wide receiver out of Wake Forest. Didn't he play some quarterback for them?
I want to say he did.
I think he
filled
did.
in for a few snaps.
I think he played. I don't know. I put best kicker available. So that's where I'm taking the best kicker. And I guess I came up with Riley Patterson out of Memphis. I can't tell you anything about Riley Patterson other than he kicks for Memphis. And I was going to look up his stats and whatnot, but then I was like, Brugler's got him ranked as the best kicker available at that point. So I'm going with Riley Patterson out of Memphis. Best kicker available, because I am drafting a kicker. I'm just not doing it in the sixth round. So there you go. The final totals: 3 pass rushers in this draft. Ojulari in the first round. Jonathan Cooper, Ohio State. Patrick Johnson, Tulane. 2 corners, although kind of late. 1 wide receiver, Rondale Moore in the second round. 1 inside linebacker in the sixth round, in the sixth round out of Iowa. 1 kicker in the seventh round, and a guard/center in the third round. I learned a lot, by the way, from this exercise about how you can't go back and say, oh, well, now that I can get this guy, I wish I could go back and get Greg Newsome in the first round to play corner instead, because if I knew I could get Patrick Johnson, then I wouldn't take Ojulari in the first round. You don't get to do that when you're on the clock.
Drafting in hindsight would be really, really easy.
Oh, if you knew it was going to be there in the second round? Oh. So here's what I wanted to do. Those are my picks. And again, there's no way the board will fall this way. Some of these guys I picked won't be there. I mean, I was a little stunned. I was a little surprised that Rondale Moore was there at 53. I was a little surprised that Tutu Atwell, now I wasn't going to draft him, but that he was there in Dane Brugler's mock at 85. So the board will not fall this way. But coming up next, we get your thoughts on my mock draft, 615-737-1025. But I let Caroline and Ian pick it apart. So now you guys get to complain about my picks. So here you go. Azeez Ojulari, Georgia in the first round. Rondale Moore, wide receiver out of Purdue in the second round. Kendrick Green, center guard, Illinois in the third round. Robert Rochelle, corner in the third round. Shakur Brown, corner in the fourth round. Jonathan Cooper, edge, Ohio State in the fifth round. Nick Neiman, inside linebacker, Iowa in the sixth round. Patrick Johnson, edge out of Tulane in the sixth round. And Riley Patterson, kicker out of Memphis in the seventh round. Caroline Fenton, Ian Safar, the floor is yours. Your reaction to my 7th-round mock. What did you like? What did you not like?
I like the first round. I think if Azeez Ojulari is there at 22, you have to take him. The Titans need so much help on defense, and I think that he is going to be one guy. Maybe he can't make an immediate impact, but he's going to be a reliable linebacker that you can have in your bench, that you can rely on him to be for the pass rush. Second round, I think I got to go corner. If there's a decent corner available, I think I have to go corner. You went wide receiver, Rondale Moore out of Purdue, and I think that he would be a good fit. I just think I'm prioritizing defense in this draft.
So I think you've got to trade down because I looked at it. I mean, obviously I looked at it saying, hey, if I'm passing on Greg Newsome, I need a corner. Like I need a corner to come out right then and there, and I sat there and I didn't want to go wide receiver. I know I've got to go wide receiver at some point. I didn't want to go wide receiver. But the corners that are sitting there, Kelvin Joseph, who I would have taken over Rondale Moore, the corner out of Kentucky, goes off the board at 49. I thought about Ifeatu Melifonwu, the corner out of Syracuse, and Elijah Molden. This is what was tough. He's got Dane Brugler, Elijah Molden, the corner out of Washington, off the board at 57. TD loves Elijah Molden. I thought about Elijah Molden with that pick. But Rondale Moore is that playmaker slot that I'm not taking in Elijah Moore in the first round, but I know makes an immediate impact. So it was between Elijah Molden, Ifeatu Melifonwu, the two corners, and Rondale Moore. I went Rondale Moore just because I know the player. And I think Rondale Moore, I don't think he's going to be a superstar. I think he's going to be like Randall Cobb. Like, I think he's going to be a really good NFL player for a long time. That's why I picked him.
Yeah, I think that he would be it's tough because this is such a deep wide receiver draft, but you look at the big name guys, they're all going within the top 20, top 25. So, yeah, you have to go for a guy that may not be a superstar right now, but is reliable. I just think that corner position is more valuable than the wide receiver position. And Dane Brugler mocked Tutu Atwell in the third round. And I think if Tutu Atwell is available in the third, you got to go corner in the second and then address those wide receiver needs.
But you're not going to know who's there.
You're not going to, based off of this.
That goes back to the exercise. You're not going to know. I would agree. If I know Tutu Atwell is there at 85, maybe I pass on Rondale Moore in the second round. But John Robinson is not going to know if that guy's going to be there in the third round. I mean, Robinson took a huge risk last year when he needed a corner, and he went tackle in the first round, then waited with that pick that they ended up using on Christian Fulton because Jalen Johnson went off the board to Chicago and Trayvon Diggs went off the board to Dallas. That was the hardest part of the exercise. To your point, I knew who Brugler was going to pick ahead of time.
Right.
So I had an idea. It was hard with that pick not to go corner there, knowing you can go Atwell in the third round. I don't think Atwell's going to be there at 85. Also, I don't like Atwell. I don't think he catches the ball enough. And I don't like receivers who can't catch. So I went Rondale Moore, but I hear what you're saying. Certainly we would look back on it after the draft, and we would think to ourselves, wait a minute. Why did you take Rondale Moore in the second round when you could have taken the starting corner right there, not screwed around with the other two corners that you drafted, hoping that one of them pans out? I totally hear you. I totally understand. I just felt like that wouldn't be right for the point of the exercise.
Right. It is so easy to say, oh, okay, well, he mocked a wide receiver in the third round, so there'll be a great wide receiver available, but you never really know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I said, I just am prioritizing the defense, but I want to hear what Ian thinks.
Well, the only thing I would say is I don't see a tight end.
That was definitely
that's a problem. That
really bothered me after the fact.
So, I don't really know much about the third round center guard combo. I like that he can play both. Took Nate Davis 6 weeks or so to get rolling. He was a third round pick. Granted, it was Charlotte and not, more of a top. Illinois was a Power 5 school. So that, would be something I would probably have to take a look at if you want to go offensive line in the third round there. And then tight end, would be the other position of need, even though we don't really technically like drafting for need. But I would like to see a tight end sprinkled in there somewhere.
So when I did the draft, the one thing I told myself is I would rip my own ass about not drafting a tight end.
Yeah.
Where it got me was Tommy Tremble at 73, the tight end out of Notre Dame. That's who I want.
And Brevin Jordan is available mid-third round.
Goes at 74.
Right.
So you can't pick him at 53. You cannot take the 73rd best player in the draft with the 53rd pick. But if you don't take them, they're not going to be there at 85. And that was where I was like, man, that's a tough spot.
Unless you draft down in the first round and pick up an early third-round pick.
So, again, I thought about taking out the Jimmy Johnson trade chart and trying to do this, and we don't know what teams are going to accept or what teams are going to be okay with. I believe the Titans either have to move down in the second round into the third and add a couple of picks, move down in the first round. I mean, I think they need to, as I've said all along, I think there are, those 4 top 100 picks, the first, the second, and the 2/3. Those have to be starters, not day one starters, but they have to ultimately become starters. I think the Titans are better suited to move down at some point and add an extra pick into that group so that you can now, if you're looking for 4 starters, you get 5 cracks at it. But if you do it, Azeez Ojulari may not be there. Or Gregory Newsom II out of Northwestern may not be there. So if you move down in the first round, then you can probably address the wide receiver position with somebody better than Rondale Moore, who I took in the second round, but it's hard when you can't make trades to try to figure out, okay, because I do. I mean, I think I circle the top of the first round, and that's where I see Tommy Tremble going, and that's where I see Brevin Jordan going. I'm not very interested in Brevin Jordan. He's a project to me, but I am interested in Tommy Tremble as kind of a block first, catch second tight end that can come in and become, Aaron Kinney was a guy the Titans had a long time ago who kind of played that role really well. But I agree with you guys. I mean, Ian, I think you're dead on that there's no tight end there. And when I did it and I wrote it all out, again, I said to myself, I would rip my butt if this is what the Titans draft and there's not a tight end there. I guess I'm giving sympathy because it's harder when you're actually trying to do it.
It is really hard. And I think, too, I am forcing defense so much in this draft, but I also have to remind myself that the Titans had to give up a lot of offensive assets to build up their defense. So, you're looking at Anthony Ferguson at tight end. I don't feel great about that being your starting tight end.
Yeah, he can't block.
Right. So trying to build up the defense, you still the Titans have created so many needs on offense as well, and it's hard to balance those two, especially when you can't trade.